Hello? Do I have anybody present?
Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, it's Walt Boyer. Who's on?
Walt, I'm on. This is Jim McLean.
I'm glad to have you.
Morning, Jim. How you doing, Jim?
Hi.
Dick Clark, Conqueror.
Let me call roll and see how many people are here so far. Pat Aarons? Dick Clark?
Yep.
Hello.
David Curtis?
This is Jerry Gray from Maryland.
Okay, I'm calling the roll. This is Walt Boyer.
Sorry.
David Curtis? Margaret Griffin? Will Horton? Gerald Highland? Joan Lewis? Expected her. Oh, she's going to be out of town. Mike Lilly? Jim McLean, I have. Alma Smith?
I'm here for Alma.
Okay. And Ida Jean Smith? Brenda Tremolay? He said she was going to be here. Ron Whalen. I don't hear them. I'm going to wait a few more minutes before we start.
Sure.
Walt, this is Jack Cummings.
Yeah, how are you, Jack? I appreciate your comments, although I felt some of them weren't complete, but that's neither here nor there. They were good comments.
Okay.
How are you doing? You haven't been doing too well lately, I heard. Been under the weather?
No, I had a serious infection, but I think it's in the past, and as you get older, it takes longer to recover. And I've also been putting a lot of energy into the advocacy.
Yeah, I can understand. I had a talk with Steve Johnson in the North Carolina Department of Insurance, and he said he had heard of previously something about the model laws. He was going to find out what had happened to them for me.
What is his position?
He's head of Special Entities Division there, which is responsible for CCRC's oversight. And he comes to our North Carolina meetings every year, and we communicate with him during the year quite a bit.
Great.
So I may be able to find out something more, hopefully, if he can give me a point of contact. He said he would look into that for me, see if we could find somebody specifically that we could talk to at NAIC. Anyone else come on? Right now, I just have Dick Clark, Jim McLean, and Al. And who is it that's taking out?
Jerry Gray for Alma Smith.
Jerry Gray. All right. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here. I think people don't want to participate because they're afraid they have to make some recommendations for people to join the NaCCRA board, and they don't want to do that. I may have been correcting
I understand that. While we're waiting, may I ask you a question about the CCRCs that come under insurance commissioners, because that is not the case in Maryland? Does coming under the insurance commissioner make you eligible for insurance guarantees?
Not necessarily. It depends on the laws of the state.
Oh, okay.
Jack?
States include guarantees for CCRCs. Guarantees extend to bank deposits and insurance policies. CCRC entry fees are not guaranteed and are fully at risk in all states.
Gotcha. I understand.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe it made a difference because they were in and came under the commissioner of insurance.
Not necessarily. I think many states put it there because a lot of residents think of it as insurance. But
yeah, too bad.
RCs have historically had, and Jack knows more about this than I do actually, but historically they have not only had some considerable freedom, let's put it that way, in terms of what they do with the fees that they receive, but they've also fought very hard to keep that freedom.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons Jack fights so hard on this business of protecting your entry fees, because in many states they're not well protected at all. I think if you heard California just passed a law that essentially says if you leave your unit or you leave the CCRC or you pass away or something, your state makes a claim on your entry fee. If CCRC delays more than 90 days, they have to pay some interest on it. Now, what that interest rate is, I don't know, but that's my understanding.
It's very low. The California law was proposed by NaCCRA, and it was gutted by Leading Age California under the leadership of the investment banking firms Ziegler and Cain Brothers, which cater to tax-exempt bond things, and so they are eager to have the industry be able to promise something with it, but still be able to book into revenue the promised fund. So what they did was to gut the proposal so that if the CCRCs, it applies only to future contracts, not to existing contracts at all, and if they use the term repayable interest fees instead of refundable, they're pretty much able to continue business as usual.
Oh, really? Oh. So using the phrase not refundable but repayable?
The industry just used semantics to avoid the dilemma, and it was led by Cain Brothers and Ziegler with support from Hampton Bridget, the law firm, and the San Francisco law firm.
Oh, my goodness. Good Lord.
I'm surprised that Ziegler got into that, to allow that, but I guess they're paid by the CCRCs anyway, too, aren't they?
The providers.
They make a commission every time there's a tax-exempt bond offering. They make a commission on selling bond offerings to CCRCs for expansion or for new CCRCs.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Well, I'm not sure we're going to get too many more people, so let me go on with the agenda to the extent that we have people here now. The first item on the agenda was considered the candidates for the board of directors. I have two candidates. They both to be members. They've not been nominated by any state, but they asked personally if they could join the borough board, and I have included their curriculum vitae to you. I'd like your opinion of whether or not you consider them viable candidates. First one is Mr. Flume. They're both from Florida. I've talked to him on the phone. He is a CPA. He's also a retired general in the Air Force. He was a comptroller in the Air Force and is very experienced with handling of finances, I'm sure. I would like your views on whether or not you think he'd make a good candidate for the board of directors. Anyone have a comment? Dick?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh dear, people are cutting out.
Did somebody get lost?
I don't know.
How long have you lived in a CCRC?
Yeah. I'm sorry, who was talking?
I'm sorry, this is Jerry Gray in Maryland. How long has he lived in a CCRC?
I don't know that for sure, but I don't think it's been very long. It's probably only a year or two.
Yeah. Even so, his background sounds good.
Yeah, but he seems very eager. I will say that he is familiar with the people that on the company that manages NaCCRA's business for us, and they seem to feel he would be a good candidate. They have recommended him.
Good.
Endorsed him. This is, pardon? I'm sorry.
Can you get him to go to Indianapolis and meet you people and others who are there?
I don't think he was in Indianapolis last year. No.
Oh, but that would have been Boston last year. Could you have him go to Indianapolis this year to meet
I think
you
he'll
people?
be there. Yeah, I anticipate he will be there. Hello? Am I cut out?
No.
No? You're expecting him in Indianapolis. Wouldn't be after you people meet him? That would be a more sound decision? Well,
The election occurs during the meeting, the annual meeting in Indianapolis, and the state presidents have been tasked by the president of NaCCRA to recommend people for the board. So I'm asking you whether or not you will endorse him.
I see no reason not to.
I'm sorry, who was that speaking?
Sorry, this is Jerry Gray. I see no reason not to endorse him. I would endorse him.
Okay.
Dick Clark, could you tell us about the other guy?
Yeah, let me get him. I have met him. He lives in Florida, but he comes up to North Carolina for the summer. And I'm trying to find my paper that has his information on it. But he is very interested in NaCCRA. He wants to get involved in one way or another. He says if he doesn't come on the board, he'd like to be on a committee somewhere. And he's very eager to become to be useful, let me put it that way, to the board. He's had considerable business experience primarily in agricultural areas, and Again, he has been recommended by our business people, partners in association management.
Do you generally have two from the same state?
Yeah, this has happened before. Marlene Varner and I were both members of the board at the same time, and I think at one time we had two people from Virginia. So it's not an impossible thing. It's not something that hasn't happened before. Has happened before to have two people on the board from the same state. Any other questions?
When Bob Nicholson steps down, will there be any directors from the state of Washington?
No, there will not. And I could ask Jim McLean if he has a candidate from Washington, but I don't know that he does or not. Jim, are you there? Have I lost
Yes, I'm
Jim?
here. No, I'm here.
Okay. Do you have anyone you could recommend from the state of Washington to be on the board of directors?
I don't know.
To take place of Bob Nicholson when he drops off. Oh? Then
We're still struggling to staff out for our work in our own state. I think it's very early for Washington State. I mean, Bob was there before we had a state organization that we had to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm still looking for people, and if anyone comes up with others, I'd like to have them. I'd like to know whether or not you feel, based on their curriculum vitae, that Kim Barley is a good candidate. Has anyone had a chance to have really read it? I guess they should ask that. He impressed me as being a very vital guy, very eager to be part of NaCCRA and very interested in working for NaCCRA.
Are we limiting ourselves to people that put themselves forward, or are we seeking out qualified people and trying to persuade them that service within NaCCRA would be positive?
Well, I have been trying to persuade some other people. I've been turned down by several people. These are the two people who have said they are willing to serve on the NaCCRA's board that I have right now. And one of the reasons I'm calling the state presidents is because I hope that they would be able to nominate people for this end, towards this end. But right now, I just have these two. One of the things I could do, Jack, is go back to the list I had last year. I'm not sure I want to do that. We turned them down before, and not everyone was happy with that list.
I understand the bylaws have the state president as a nominating committee, and the idea is that they start with the criteria that the board needs. That stays in the bylaws. That the state presidents would first define criteria that are for strengths that are needed on the board, and then would try to identify people and recruit people who would best serve the needs of the organization. It's tended to move toward drift, where just those people who sort of come forward and say, well, I'll do that. And along the way, we've lost some people like Jack Snyder, who seem to be wanting to make a contribution but felt they couldn't. So I'm wondering if we don't need to rethink this whole process to be sure that NaCCRA is an effective organization moving forward.
Well, you make a good statement there, Jack. The state presidents were provided with the basic information that Bennett provided us on the qualifications for board members and requirements for board members. And that was sent to all the state presidents a couple of months ago. They've had that available to them. And I have, at each of these meetings, I've asked them for recommendations, and to a person, they've come back and said, we would prefer to put these people in our state organization and not send them to the national organization to make recommendations. So I think we do need another mechanism. I agree with you from that point of view.
That's become a major problem, and I notice on this call that most of the state presidents have elected not to participate.
And I think that's part of the reason they don't want to have to make to say they're not going to look for our membership.
Well, they may just feel that NaCCRA is not effective right now. There's some sense that NaCCRA...
That may be part of it as well. I can agree with that.
So I'm just wondering if we're identifying the root problem so that we're correcting what the problem is, or are we just sort of floating?
Well, I would like to hear from the state presidents if they have any comments along that line.
How many spots are there on the board open?
I'm sorry, say again?
How many spots on the board are open?
Right now anywhere from 1 to 3, depending on how. We have to have a minimum of 9 according to our bylaws, current bylaws. The maximum can be 11. So we need from 1 to 3 that we can put on the board. So,
is there someplace else other than the board that these two gentlemen could serve to see what their interests are, how capable they are, what have you? Are there committees that they could be assigned to for a year or so?
Yes. The answer to that question is yes. We could ask them to lead, for example, the CCRC Financial Soundness Committee, which currently is inactive.
That sounds like the general's cup of tea.
Yeah, it is. It pretty much, and I have mentioned this to him as another possibility. But right now, our highest priority is finding people for the board, and then filling these committee chairs. I have recommended to the president a list of about 6 committees that NaCCRA could form to help advance our programs.
I would think that the number one position most desirable to get on the board would be somebody who's in the Washington, D.C. area and that has some familiarity with government or lobbyists or government committees. And there probably aren't any of those who have volunteered.
They're not volunteering. We do have one member, I shouldn't put it that way. Pete Straub of Virginia is on our board, and he lives in the Washington area. Unfortunately, he's diabetic, and he's been very ill lately. Hasn't been able to be very active. I have asked him if he can't be active, he could find somebody to be with him. I've asked both Virginia and Maryland to look for people that live in the Washington, D.C. area and recommend them. I have not had any response from them on that regard.
Yes, at one time, Paige Hawk, who lives at Ingleside Rock Creek, was very active in working with Jack Matheson when he was president of NaCCRA, in working with Congress and within the federal bureaucracy to advocate for things that were beneficial for us. Paige just lost her husband. He died within the last month or so. She's chosen no longer to be active in NaCCRA, but that she might return if NaCCRA were reinvigorated.
If we could get her, she would be very good. But her name hasn't been recommended. You're the first person that really said we ought to get her back to me. No one else has recommended her. And I've not received any recommendations from either Pat Aarons or from Alma.
Yeah, here in Maryland, we had difficulty getting state officers this year. And the reason that I'm here for Alma is that she stepped up at our May meeting when we did not have anybody who was willing to be our president this year. And the people that are the most interested in NaCCRA, of which there's a very small group in Maryland, were very divided over some of the things that were happening with leading age and whatnot. So we haven't had anyone to say we need to have somebody to serve at the national level. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, we're still looking, and Jack is absolutely right. We need somebody in the national area.
Yeah. Well, we have one community that is very close to Washington, and many of the people who live there worked in Washington in various government departments, and we can't even get them to participate in our Maryland chapter. I think they've had it with government.
Well, that may be true. Yeah. Okay. Obviously I'm not getting very good answers from you all, so I'm going to move on to the next subject, which is the advocacy program.
Walt?
Yes.
Walt, before you move on, this is Jim McLean.
Yes, Jim.
You know, one of the problems that we have is that we don't really understand what the obligation is that somebody's taking on. You know, like how many meetings? Where are the meetings? Do you have to chair a committee? If you go to the annual meeting, are your expenses paid, or do you have to stand the cost of everything? You know, in other words, maybe all the rest of you folks know exactly what's involved, but we're a relatively new organization. I know that I don't know, most of I would say all of our executive committee don't know what's involved, and certainly if we approached a member, we would have very little information to provide that person with, and we will recruit it. If somebody will give me some information that I can use, I'll go after getting you a Washington person.
I can send you some information, but I'll tell you real quickly a summary, and Jack Cumming may know more history than I do. NaCCRA has usually about $1,000, perhaps sometimes a little more than that, to spend on travel, and usually that's reserved for the president. Because of our financial situation, we have not had the funds to be able to fund travel for most of the people on the board, and we've had to ask them to cover that themselves. Now, I will tell you that that's not everybody worries too much about that. I have been involved with CCRCs since 1988, starting in New Jersey, and I have never asked for reimbursement for travel. There was a period of 4 years when I was traveling twice a month between Northern Virginia actually and New Jersey to support a CCRC development there, and didn't ask for any reimbursement, although it was offered. It's pretty much voluntary, and you're pretty much on your own, I would say, for your finances.
How many meetings do you need to attend?
Say again, please?
How many meetings do you have to attend in person?
Oh, normally it's 2 meetings a year. Bob Nicholson has proposed that we change that to make it just 1 meeting a year. That hasn't been finally approved yet that I remember. Do you know, Jack, whether that proposal was approved or not?
Well, there are a lot of things that are just sort of chatter, and that's been one of them. One of the things that Jack Stater said was, "Why are we having these meetings? We go to, they don't seem to really have value commensurate with the cost, and we could do it electronically and be more effective." And I think that view was rejected, which was a factor in his deciding that he could no longer conscientiously be part of the organization. So I think that's up in the air. I think NaCCRA needs direction. Okay.
The other part of it is that the board holds a teleconference once a month. And you'll be expected to be online for that once a month. But you do that from your home.
I might add that at the Boston meeting, where the officers were elected, there were 2 directors who participated by teleconference. In other words, they did not physically attend the meeting. Unfortunately, their votes were not recorded because the secretary neglected to check with phone people in tallying the votes. So there's been confusion along the way, to put it mildly, but there's no reason why in-person attendance. We met at the Peak Conference in Washington. I think there might have been 15 people there total, maybe 20 from the surrounding communities. In Boston, there was a handful of resident members who attended. So generally, we get better participation just by opening phone lines and letting people dial in and trying to manage it that way.
Yeah. And that's what we do during... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you don't have to do any more because I'm taking up a lot of people's time on the phone. But, we're an organization in need, and we want to recruit good people, and we don't really understand what we want. I mean... frankly, with what you just told me, I'd be embarrassed to go after somebody who I consider of high quality to tell them what I want. So,
well, one of the answer to that question is to me, is advocacy programs. And Jack Cumming, who's online with us, has gone to a great deal of effort to put together a summary of the potential advocacy programs that we have. Now, last year, we got together, that is the group, the NaCCRA members of the Joint Task Force with Leading Age, and we decided that as far as Leading Age was concerned, we wanted to propose a single item, that is protection of the entry fees as our main and primary issue, and we felt it was necessary to focus on one issue at a time. But Jack has put together an excellent summary of a variety of issues in which we have an interest, and I did send them to all the state presidents along with my invitation to this meeting. So those are the things that we need to pursue and push over the next several years. Right now there are two ways that we can pursue this. We can advocate ourselves. We have not been very effective in doing that. We can use other activities to help, like Leading Age, AARP, and others, work with them. We have an agreement with Leading Age for a joint task force to come together and see if we can come up with some advocacy issues that we would like to pursue together. Jack is the NaCCRA leader of that group, and he's done a lot, as I said, he's done a lot of work to try to make that happen. I think that's the main thing we need to pursue in NaCCRA. That's the reason we exist, and frankly, in my opinion. And Jack has been our leader in that. He's been trying to, how do I want to put this? He's been advocating for that kind of a program within NaCCRA for several years, but he has not had a lot of success in getting people help in doing so. So let me turn that over to Jack and let him describe those situations.
Well, I think that's a fairly succinct summary. Let me just say first, on this protection of entry fees, it's not just for refundable entry fees. People who have non-refundable entry fees have made an investment in the assurance that those entry fees will be used to fulfill their contracts. So when, as in my case, the entry fee is taken by the provider and lost in expected adventure in Mexico, that's what my provider did with my entry fee, there's no regulation to prevent them from doing that. And they make the argument, well, cash is king, and entry fees are cash. They don't recognize that it's paid in consideration of a contract. So there's work to be done there, and we thought that was a pretty high priority because giving integrity to these contracts and not just hoping that the future sort of works out for the best seemed like a desirable thing. But the providers have not felt that they had to take the residents seriously, and most recently we've seen that with this joint task force where the providers have not really moved it forward very progressively. We did have a very response from Steve Mogg, who's an attorney, a defense attorney, who now works for Leading Age, and it was couched very much like, well, look, you've got too many issues. Well, he went through and found all the issues that had ever been mentioned in NaCCRA meetings. He didn't respond to the correspondence we had directly on the issue of the entry fee guarantees. So NaCCRA's biggest problem is that people don't take it seriously, and they don't take it seriously because, frankly, it doesn't really have strong membership. It doesn't have a lot of support from the state organizations, as we see by the lack of participation in today's phone call. And frankly, the 600-pound gorilla in the room is the Florida organization, 13,000 members strong. Half the CCRC residents in the state of Florida are members, and they are able to influence the providers and the legislature in the state of Florida, but they've not taken much of an interest in national issues. And so that leaves the rest of the nation more or less at sea. I'm very impressed with what the state of Washington has achieved. They were able to get in place for the first time a CCRC law within just a few months after their formation. They've been very, very effective there. So in general, these matters are just drifting, and most residents came to their CCRCs to retire. They want to be retired, and they're tired, and they're not looking for this kind of thing, and many of them don't understand or want to understand the risks that are involved in the way these organizations are managed. So it's an uphill slog, but I think we have no choice but to keep pushing at the rock, and eventually we might get a movement going. Now, unfortunately, NaCCRA chose we used to have an educational research arm for NaCCRA called NaCCRA-U, and they asked the NaCCRA webmaster thought that was confusing to have more than one website, so they asked that be branded without the NaCCRA name. So the major advocacy now is under the Active Aging Advocates brand name, and that, of course, doesn't carry with it all the organizational overhead that you've heard Walt talking about today. But it really is it's the same advocacy agenda that NaCCRA would have been working on if NaCCRA had evolved as an advocacy organization, which it's not. It's more just I guess a discussion organization. There's a lot of discussion that goes on, and there's a group of people who are active in that discussion.
Thank you, Jack. That's a good description. It's the program that we need to pursue. One of the big concerns right now among NaCCRA is whether it's or not it's really going to survive. Presently, we have about a little over 1% of the total population and CCRC population in the country are members of NaCCRA. We probably need to be closer to 10% before we can be truly effective. And that's the issue that Bob Nicholson was pursuing before he became president and while he's been president. But unless we can make some progress in terms of advocacy and show something, people are not inclined to want to join. So it's a chicken or the egg situation, which comes first, and right now we're fighting to find out which one does come first, I guess. It's the best way to put it. Any comments from any of you on that?
One of the things that has concerned me from, I've only been in NaCCRA here in Maryland for 5 years, is that each state is so different, and most of the issues have to be passed in state legislatures, that people somehow don't feel a need for a national organization. And yet, I myself am always in favor of national organizations, if only as a place to exchange information and what's going on in all of the states. We have found it very helpful to see what has been accomplished in New Jersey and some other places. And we recently, we get a lot of pushback, obviously, from Leading Age and another organization in Maryland whenever we advocate in the state legislature for passing protections for residents' rights. I mean, passing them here only indicates to other people maybe that it can be done. I mean, it's not like there's a whole lot that can be done at the national level since we are closely regulated by our state legislatures, is I think what I'm saying. But I do see the value of sharing what's going on in other states.
Well, the areas in which we can make some contributions nationally, there are three areas that I believe we can make some contributions nationally. One is in the medical area, things like the control of what happens financially following hospitalization, let's say, if you were admitted or just there for observation, for example. That's a big issue right now.
We worked on that in the state to at least get people aware of it and push our hospitals on doing more about that. But I'm not sure how well we can do anything to change the federal level, except maybe by pushing hospitals. I don't know.
Well, there are bills in Congress that affect this, and we've been trying to get them passed. There's a bill right now concerning this in both the Senate and the House. They've been sitting there
talked to our Congress about that. Yes, I've talked about that bill to our congressman, and he said the Congress is in such disarray they won't even look at anything like that.
Yeah, that's my understanding. That it's very difficult, but we have to continue to push it. If the people in Congress understand that people are interested in a bill, they will take action on it. Another area in which we can
people to in touch with enough
progress is with the Federal Accounting Standards Board. They established the standards which CCRCs use for accounting, and those standards, unfortunately, there was a separate set of standards set up just for CCRCs.
Yes.
It's a very poor, in my opinion, I haven't really read the whole thing, but what I've heard about it, in my opinion, leaves me feeling it's a very poor standard. Jack may have a different opinion about it. He's probably read more of it than I have.
I've had contact with FASB. It's back channel, and it's confidential, but that is a problem. They're being strongly lobbied by the investment banking interests that have a strong interest in CCRC accounting being less than rigorous.
Oh, Lord.
The accounting profession draws its income from its clients. They don't benefit from addressing the common interest. They work for clients, and that affects how they put their standards together. There is a claim that they're principled, but they're obviously not principled when one industry is singled out to have less rigorous accounting with lower integrity than that which applies to other comparable industries.
Well said. And for those of you who know a little bit about history, back over 100 years ago, in fact, from the 19th century after the Civil War, there was a lot of failure in the insurance industry, and as a result, towards the end of that century and then the beginning of the 20th century, a lot of laws were passed at the state level to strengthen the insurance industry. They now have some of the strongest regulations of any industry that exists, but those regulations do not apply to CCRCs.
Yeah, right.
And for Jerry, I might just say, because Walt's brought up a good example, insurance laws are enacted at the state level. They're identical among every state, just like the uniform code of electrical, for electrical wiring that Walt Boyer alluded to in the agenda. So there are mechanisms to have state laws where you don't go state by state by state, legislator by legislator by legislator. That could only be done, though, with a strong national organization, and we haven't had that. We can't influence the the 3-day observation period requiring healthcare is, being championed by other lobbying organizations, and NaCCRA would just piggyback on and then claim credit. But, NaCCRA is pretty insignificant. We're not even on the radar screen, and Leading Age only pays attention to us because the former CEO felt that the providers ought to be listening more to residents, because otherwise there's going to be scandal that's going to scar the market, and the CCRC industry will be diminished to be no more than assisted living for those nearing the end of life. And I think that's beginning to happen. There hasn't been that kind of scandal that brought about the insurance regulation, but the word of mouth among people is that you want to think twice before you move into CCRC, and that's unfortunate, but that's what the industry has brought about by its own action. He was trying to change that. That's how we got to the Joint Task Force. I'm not sure that the current administration is as enthusiastic about pursuing that, and so where that's going to head is unclear, but it is clear that the market is moving away from CCRCs as the entering population becomes older and older. The entering population becomes older and more infirm, and therefore the CCRCs are less attractive to the younger, vital, vigorous people that would be needed to have a healthy CCRC industry.
The other thing that changed that at our place, because everybody in Maryland, all the CCRCs are complaining about the kinds of people that are entering, that they're not entering soon enough, they're getting here and they're already worn out, they don't want to be involved, is that the ADA, the disability laws also pushed us to admit people to our CCRC that would not have been admitted 15 years ago.
The Type A
makes a big difference too.
No, Type A CCRCs are allowed to exercise selectivity under both the Fair Housing Law and the Americans with Disabilities Law. The Americans with Disabilities Law applies more to people who become infirm after they're in there. For example, Lillian Hyatt won that case under the ADA law when her provider would not allow her to bring a walker into the dining room.
Right.
The industry is moving toward the fee-for-service because most prospective residents don't realize the cost risk that they're taking on when they move into a fee-for-service type CCRC, and that allows the industry to profit, and that model is governed by the Fair Housing Law. They're required to take all comers.
Right. Even here in Maryland, at least 2 of our Type A's are now using Type C contracts also.
Well, because you can get more money for the executives. Well, of course they do it.
Yeah.
And it's a survival issue for them, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is, because, as people live longer, the money that they came with is getting harder and harder to stretch to the end in those Type A's.
Another aspect of that right now is the fact that throughout the country, incomes haven't really been going up, and the cost of being on a Type A CCRC continues to increase.
Right.
Can't afford it anymore.
Yeah. True.
That's another driver. I won't say it's a big issue, but right now, but it is a driver that is influencing the numbers of people that go into Type A CCRCs.
Yeah.
But that's just because there's a misperception, because the cost is the same. You're going to have the same costs as you age, whether the provider is taking the financial risk for you or you take it. So we have people here in our community, which claims to be type B, but it's really a type C, who are paying $9,000 a month in the care center, $5,000 a month for an apartment because one of the couple had to go to the care center, so they're paying a total of $9,000, $14,000 a month. Let me tell you that then, whereas in a type A, that same $5,000 or even less would be covering the whole thing. That is a tremendous hardship, and many of those people burn through all their wealth, and only wealthy people are admitted. You have to prove your wealth before you're allowed to move in.
Right. Right. Yep. So I think, for one thing, we have to look hard at how CCRCs are changing. Have to be realistic about the way CCRCs are changing too, and I'm not sure what that means, but we can't pretend that they're like they used to be.
Yep.
Well, they're now assisted living with an entry fee.
Yeah, well, sometimes we look around and think it's half the people who come in, but I think realistically it's more like a third of the people who come in. It's assisted living with the entry fee.
Yeah.
And it's discouraging.
Well, we're getting away from the agenda, but that
Right.
comments are good. We've been here an hour, and we really should break off. I want to make a couple of announcements. First of all, I did send you some information about memberships, and you can look in that in your state and find out. That list was as of the end of February, so it may have changed since then. NaCCRA is financially in difficulty right now in that we are hoping that our income for the second half of the year will bring us up to the point where we will be able to meet all our obligations, and usually the biggest part of our income does come in the second half of the year. But frankly, I will have to say that NaCCRA is at the moment financially impaired, and it really does need to increase its membership in order to continue to survive. So that's something that we'd like to push as well as advocacy. I was going to call and get some information about the status of the bylaws. Last time I did check, there were more people voting negative than positive on the bylaws. I don't know whether that's changed since then. That was about 2 weeks ago. And I wanted to ask for your comments on the bylaws. If you had any. So let me just ask if anyone has comments on the bylaws that they would like to relate to me. We've had a lot of comments, and we're listening to them. I'm not sure what we'll do if the bylaws are not approved. One of the biggest issues is the fact that under the old bylaws, there really does not designate any organization, any part of the organization, as that organization that's authorized to do business for NaCCRA. Traditionally, the board of directors has been the body that does that, makes the business decisions for the organization. But the bylaws don't say that yet. And we were hoping to, among other things, that we would get that into the bylaws so that we would be perhaps legally constrained, let me put it that way, by them in terms of the authority of the board of directors. bylaws do not pass, we will probably make a motion in Indianapolis to modify the bylaws to that extent at least. Any comments on the bylaws before I close up?
Do you mean that you personally are going to make that motion in Indianapolis, or that?
Well, if the bylaws do not pass, I will make that a kind of a motion because I think we need it. The board needs some formal authority for what it's been doing, frankly. It doesn't have it. It's been doing it. It's traditionally been doing it since the very beginning, but the bylaws don't provide for that, and they really should.
Well, what are examples of things the board has been doing that were questionable under the bylaws?
Almost any business that it conducts, including the contract with partners in association management, for example.
So you're saying that contract requires approval by the membership under today's bylaws?
Under today's bylaws, it doesn't say who's supposed to approve it.
Well, doesn't the board have the authority to act for the membership?
The bylaws don't say that either. That's the problem.
I mean, isn't that implicit in bylaw? I mean, that just seems obvious.
No, it really is not implicit. If you go into the Robert's Rules and other rules, that's not implicit. That they suggest that be explicitly defined in the bylaws, and we don't do that.
Should we have a legal opinion on that, whether that's true or not?
Oh, I think if we hadn't got a legal opinion, they'd find that way too.
Well, I don't think we should be amateur lawyers parsing bylaws and legal matters.
Well, anyway, my question is, do any of our listeners have additional comments on the bylaws?
No further.
I'm not hearing any, so I'm going to proceed on. Last item I want to mention, so we only have three state presidents here, but in Indianapolis, on Saturday, there will be a state president's luncheon, and I would like to invite you all to attend the state president's luncheon. If you're there, I will send out an email in the next few days pointing this out and asking if there's anything in particular you would like to have discussed at that luncheon.
Okay.
Is there anything anyone else wants to bring up that's here today? I want to open it up to any other issues that you may think of. Hearing none, I will declare this meeting adjourned. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Walt.